sharing down below. So you'll see my eyes going back and forth. Y'all are used to this by now. All right. Well, anyway, I'm so glad that y'all are here. I had no idea when I started thinking about this. I knew that there were a few folks who are really, really interested. And I know that there are people who are interested who aren't here this evening, and some of whom are just going to be sort of looking at the video and then talking to me individually because they can't be here on a Monday night. So we have a really good crowd of folks, and I'm very, very happy that is the case. So what I've subtitled this Episcopal 101, Learning Our Stories. We all will bring our stories to this conversation, these conversations over the next few weeks. But we're going to hear how the Episcopal Church tells its story. And so the question, or not the question, I mean, the concern, challenge, possibility is how do our stories, our individual stories, intersect with the Episcopal Church's stories? So what I plan on doing this evening is I want to find out who's in this room, this virtual Zoom room. And then I'll give you an overview of what we'll be doing for the next several weeks. There's always a question about what does Anglican, what does Episcopalian, what does Episcopal, how do all those words fit together? So I've got a little video that addresses that. And then tonight we'll talk about where the Anglican / Episcopal Church came from, and I'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. So let's get this so you're not, come on. There we go. You still seeing, are you seeing a slide that says overview of the evening?
Yes.
Yes.
I haven't done this for quite a while, so I mean,
We're also seeing slide 3 in the presenter note.
Right.
Yeah, well, we don't. Yeah, well, we're not going to see any. Oh, you see that one?
Well,
Is that better?
That's the full one.
yeah.
There we go. Oh, Lord of mercy. So, so the question is, the first question is, who's in the room? And when I was the university chaplain at the University of Denver, which I did for 11 years, anytime I got together with a group of people, whether it was physically or in this configuration, although we rarely used an online configuration, I would always say, this collection of people will never happen again. This particular one. And I would guess that as we move forward through the next several weeks, some of you are going to opt out, some of you are going to come in, some of you are going to have your pictures available or not. And so I always want to take advantage of the opportunity for us to recognize who is here, but also to recognize visually who is here. Because some of you see each other on a Sunday morning, but you may be at the earlier service, or you may be at the later service, or you're on a hurry to get out, you don't go into coffee hour, you don't interact. And so I take any opportunity I can to create community. And so I want to know who's in the room. And so that's what we're going to do now. And with that, what I'd like to know, and we'll take as long as we have, I can compress other stuff as we go along. What's your story? What are you bringing to this series of conversations? And I right now I see 10 screens, but I know that I'm seeing 2, 4, 6, 8, and I know there are several folks in the crowd screen, which could bring this up to 11. Without that's just the people I'm seeing, and then and I see other people where there's only one. So we've got about 14 or 15 people on this this evening. And so I'm really, really interested in knowing who you are. I don't want a whole lot of background. When I say background, it's kind of, what's your religious background?
Okay.
Are you Episcopalian who's looking for a refresher course? Are you coming in from some non-liturgical tradition? That kind of thing. What's your knowledge level? I've had people doing the Episcopal 101 who have a lot of background in history, a lot of background in theology. I have people who are at ground zero. And so it's helpful for me to know as we move forward what kind of background is. And then, do you have specific interests? Those are the kinds of questions. So it should take one to 2 minutes per person. And I know that, if we were sitting in a room, we could be going around the circle, but we're not sitting in a room. And your screens look different than my screen. And so I'm going to sort of exercise the prerogative of being the teacher, convener, whatever you want. And I'm going to call on you based on where you all are on my screen. And because, like I said, it's not going to work on yours. So I'm going to start with the whites, and because they are to my, well, actually, when I'm looking at it, to my left, but that's my right hand. So that's why I'm not gonna, I'll just figure it out. So whites, tell us who you are, and all of that stuff that's on that slide, the name, background, knowledge level, and specific interests.
Oh, I get to go first.
And you have to obviously have
You go for both of us.
Oh, I can go for both of us. We'll see. We're the whites. I'm Serena, and this is Darren. And we've been coming to Good Shepherd kind of off and on for almost a year now, I think. Almost. It was around Easter, I think, so not quite. But we're almost empty nesters. We have two older, almost college graduates, recent college graduates. And my background is probably your classic cradle Catholic school all the way through, K through college. And then I taught in a Catholic school for many, many years. I just recently switched and doing something a little bit different now. So I'd say my knowledge level is probably, I taught first grade. So I spent lots of time with first graders and their religion. So.
Oh,
Which is
bless you.
one of the best places to be.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific interests?
Outside of church
No,
related?
I'm thinking about in terms of Episcopal 101.
Oh gosh, just a general overview, the comparison, similarities, the differences.
Okay.
I see a lot of similarities that I like and feel comfortable with. So
okay.
You want to talk?
Sure. So my name is Darren. My background is I grew up Presbyterian, and since we were married, mostly went to the Catholic Church. Same thing. We've been going together for last year.
At Good Shepherd?
Yeah. We hadn't gone separately. That's my knowledge level, I don't know.
Okay.
It's here and there. And specific interest, just kind of just general interest.
Cool. All right, Fred and Kathy, you're next.
Did you say Fred and Kathy?
I did.
Okay. I was saying something to him. I said, well, what all we're going to mention. Okay. Well, let's see. We've been married 9 years. We were both widowed, and we met at church, passing the peace. So we've been together 11 years, married 9. And what? You're in your cradle Episcopalian. He is.
Oh yeah.
And I was born and raised Lutheran up till I was 21 when I went through the Episcopal classes with my first husband. And so that was back when I was 22. So it's 50 years some have passed. So I'd like to see anything new in the Episcopal Church, a refresher course more or less for both of us.
Cool.
Anything you want?
No,
Well,
that-
my
that-
background, I've been a lifelong Episcopalian. I'm a native Coloradan, and as a young child, I attended Bible school and that sort of thing down in Castle Rock at Christ Church down there. And when Kathy and I met, we were both in Michigan at the time. We attended the same
You know all that,
church. Okay.
they want the whole history of
I
it.
know. And that's where we met, same Episcopal church back there. Specific interests for me, church-wise, is as a matter of history. I would like to know more about the history of the Episcopal Church. Its
Oh,
background.
bless you, my son.
Oh, I should add that too.
Okay, all right, cool. The Bates family.
I'll go first. Matt and Molly. My background, I grew up Catholic, went all the way through, confirmed in the Catholic Church, and was fairly active until just outside of college. And honestly, just kind of wasn't a practicing Catholic, and haven't been a practicing Catholic since I was about 22 years old. But I would say my knowledge level, I don't even want to try to estimate it, again, because it's been several years. There are, as others have shared, similarities, with my experience in the Catholic Church, but there are a lot of things, one about the Episcopal faith and Good Shepherd in particular, that are attractive to us. And the specific interests on my part are, learning the steps and processes, to become, for lack of a better term, kind of like a confirmed or a full-fledged member of the Episcopal faith. And I didn't mention we have 2 younger children, and that's another big reason why we're, really, trying to expose them to the church and to faith, and being around good communities and people who can share common values with them. And so understanding kind of what that process can look like, so that we can educate our children and let them start to learn for themselves and make their faith decisions as they grow. But
Great.
that's it for me.
Molly.
Molly, and my background is occasionally catching church after a sleepover at a friend's house. I mean, did not grow up going to church with my own family, good, bad, or indifferent. So I zero background, zero knowledge, starting at ground zero, as you said, Father Gary. And my interests are just, learning more about the history, learning more about what I want my own faith to look like, and really most important is raising our children with faith and community, and like Matt said, letting them learn about it and decide, what's right for them. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Connie and Peter.
Well, I'll start with the name Badger. Has nothing to do with a small furry animal or state of Wisconsin. It's named after a tiny little village in England that was nonetheless a Domesday village. That is, it was listed on the census that was ordered by William the Conqueror in 1086. It had, I think, 4 freemen, 8 villains, and 6 slaves. Slavery was very common in England, as it was all over Europe at that time. The next big event that, let's see, in 1475, my ancestor Thomas was called Thomas of Badgeworth, and all of his descendants thereafter were known as Badgers. Thomas of Badgeworth was from Gloucestershire in England.
Well, go, just do the
Well,
religion.
wait a second. It was from Gloucestershire in England, and it really brings up the church history there, because he was a tenant farmer on, but he was given an opportunity to bequeath his land to his son. He was a tenant farmer. Gloucestershire at that time was largely monastic lands. Has a big, beautiful cathedral. You might have seen it in Harry Potter, but that was not a cathedral until about 1830. Before 1830, Gloucestershire was.
We'll get to history. So we need to move through here.
Yeah.
This part of that.
What was that?
I just what I said. You need to move on to
Oh,
your
okay.
to you.
Well, yeah. To me, my mother and father were married by an Episcopal priest. I was baptized in a Mormon church. My mother's family had a close attachment with the Episcopal Church, going back to her grandmother, and my father's family was Mormon, and they were Mormon pioneers since about 1835. The Mormon migration to Salt Lake City was 1847. Most of my ancestors.
So we got the history thing going strong here.
Yeah.
All right.
He's into history.
We've talked about that. So you know a lot about history. Do you have specific interests? Or
do I have? Yeah, history, genealogy. Right now, I am working on a website on the Library of Congress in which they listed about 140 maps with very generic descriptions, and I'm making them much more definite.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got history. History is key. Connie, what about you?
Well, I grew up. My mother was very religious, and my father didn't believe in religion at all. But he went to church because his family did, and because my mom did. So she was Lutheran, Episcopal, Methodist. What else? Whatever. And so when we married, I didn't know much about the Episcopal religion, but we went to church, and I always like it. And I believe in God very much, and I just want to communicate with him and Jesus somehow.
Okay. So good sort of general sort of stuff. I know that there's more than Amaru who is here. That's the name that's on the screen.
Yeah, we're using his computer.
Y'all are here, the Craws are here.
Yeah, it's myself, Mauro, and Patty. Yeah, my name is Raul Corral. My background, K through 12 was Roman Catholic school, but my family was actually Baptist. So I kind of saw both perspectives. And for my knowledge level of Episcopalian, it really just started a few months ago when we first started looking for churches in our area here, more aligned with our belief and acceptance of others, and and of course God as well, and how that's handled. So we really liked, we read about Episcopalian. We attended the church not too far away from our house here. And we're really happy with what we heard and what we experienced in the service and out of the service as well. You know, the after service coffee, talking to others. Specific interests for me. Well, it's important for us to raise our child in an environment that we believe in. We've tried other churches. We've settled on Episcopalian is our path, and we're looking to see how does our son become baptized into Episcopalian Catholicism. Word there. So yeah, that's what I'm looking to learn, as well as learn about history and more details about Episcopalian.
Oh, Amaru, since I can see you, what do you have to add to this? What's your where are you on this? And let me just say, this is the first time in the 6 years that I've done this that I've said, let's open it up to all ages. If they think that they can sort of work with the material. And I've talked with Amaro and I've talked with his parents, and I think that he can. So he's a full participant. He's not just sort of sitting off working. So I'm inviting you to bring what you're interested in here, Amaro.
So my name is Amara Grau. And my background is like off and on in what just like Catholic churches. And my knowledge level would be a little low. I'm trying to my interests are in learning more about getting baptized.
Okay. Cool. Is Patty there? Yeah. I know. Got a lot of people. You need a wide angle lens here.
Musical chairs.
Exactly. Yeah, my name is Patty. My background is a little different than a little bit in here. I was born and raised in Peru, which is mainly heavy on Roman Catholicism. So I was raised in the Catholic environment, but I went to a Methodist school because that was the best school my parents decided to. So so I had two different religions growing up, and I did not see a whole lot of what we see now with Catholic, Roman Catholic churches with all the political views. But nothing like that in my childhood. But as I'm going and growing with my kid here, my knowledge level has expanded to not just narrow to going to a mass, getting the holy water, or the confessions and all that. None of the stuff that I was doing, it actually is beyond that now, because I'm a mom and I want my son to learn about God deeply, so he can make his own decisions, of what he believes and what he in his soul will ask him to follow, as well as getting knowledge of what the church can offer for him as well. So yeah, I already started reading the book as well, a little bit of the history. So yeah, it's the more you dive in, as the author narrates the story of the history of the church, it kind of helps you to understand why there was a little bit of not of the division, of more of the beliefs of what the church should be focusing on. So I think diving into it, it will help us to educate our kid as well. And I love thank you, Reverend Gary. I love your worships every Sunday that we go. Yeah, they're amazing. We can't wait to listen to Reverend Gary, because
All right. Okay.
so deeply about it, about every subject, and I think about it. I never thought of that direction. It's like every single passage that you read, it has a meaning, and it's so deeply that you can actually understand. So yes, absolutely, and so welcoming the community as well.
Okay, cool. Amy.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Amy Lem Vary. I grew up. We really had no formal religion, or so I was kind of agnostic. I mean, two of my brothers went to Catholic school, so they became Catholics, and then one became a Christian, and then another. He and I were sort of like agnostic. I had four brothers, so and our parents were Buddhists, so it's kind of all over the place. I guess believe in religious freedom in the family, but I felt that I wanted to find out more about church just in general. And about 5 years ago, I was talking with someone, and he said, "Oh, well, why don't you come try our church. This is in New Jersey. There was Christ Church, and it's an Episcopal church. He said he used to be Catholic, but he converted to Episcopalian. So I asked my husband Richard, who's English. I said, well, why don't we go to church? He said, because I used to go 8 times a week. So growing up, he was in school, they had to attend church 8 times a week. So I said, well, you know, if we just go once a week or once every so often, maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing. So we started going to that Christ Church, and I enjoyed it. And I actually got baptized about 3 years ago. So then we moved here, and after a thorough search for church shopping, we settled on, I shouldn't say settled, we decided the right place for us was Good Shepherd. And so, I mean, as far as knowledge is concerned, I'm way at the bottom. My husband thinks he knows it all, so he's out in steamboat skiing. So I said, well, yeah.
You can say anything that you want. Good. Cool.
So yeah, so I mean, I even joined the choir here. I love the church.
That's
so
cool.
much.
Cool. So Bruce, Mr. Oxenbury.
He joined.
Okay. So the last name basically says it all, Oxenbury. You can tell it's very Old English. My background is that I had no religious upbringing at all from the time up until about 18 years old. A girl that I was going out with, we went to her United Methodist Church. And then I sort of backed off religion for a while. And when Elaine and I got together back in 1977, I started attending the Anglican Church in Vancouver. And I was baptized and confirmed in the Anglican Church over a period of about 5 years. And been there ever since. I would, if they say that a little knowledge is dangerous, then I'm dangerous about my knowledge of the Episcopal Church. And one of the reasons that I'm wanting to attend this is to absorb more knowledge about the foundation of the church, its directions, how it was manifested, and just to soak up as much knowledge as I can, to not be as dangerous to myself or other people.
All right, cool. Marcia, your photo just showed up, so I'm going to go to you now.
Well, I had clients. I'm a cradle Episcopalian, and I haven't really had any instruction since confirmation. And I thought this would be a good time to brush up. And I'm kind of interested in some of the way back history of it before 6th grade confirmation.
Okay, that works. And Cynthia.
So you'll see me next week. Sorry. I'll send it to
It's okay.
So my name is Cynthia Sabinski. I was born and baptized an Episcopalian, but grew up Baptist. And after I finished college, I went back to being an Episcopalian, kind of drifted, came back. But and my knowledge level is probably pretty weak, just because of drifting and coming back. And my specific interest is to really become knowledgeable about the Episcopal Church again. At one time I felt like I was, but probably wasn't. So I'm looking forward to learning.
Cool. Well, this is a great group. Lots of variety, from Baptist to Mormon to Episcopalian to nothing. That's great. And that's one of the reasons I really like teaching this, sort of dealing with teaching this class, is it engages me in a lot of different ways. I just full disclosure in a few seconds. I did not grow up Episcopalian. I converted when I was in seminary, actually. That was when I actually became an Episcopalian. But that was 40 plus years ago. And so I've been doing this a long time, but I was baptized as an adult. Some of you know that because I've told that story in church. But I mean, I was 13, so sort of semi an adult, but I still wasn't baptized in the Episcopal Church. I came to the Episcopal Church. I was confirmed in the Episcopal Church, and then have spent the best part of my life in both respects of what best part means as an Episcopalian. So anyway, I'm so grateful that you all are here, that you have shared with one another what your situations in life are. And I hope that the next time that you're in church, you'll recognize each other. And you'll say, I saw you on this call, you know, and so over the next 6 weeks, all of a sudden we have a community that's grown by 15 or 20. You know, it's not just that you're there on a Sunday, you know each other. And I think that's why I'm so grateful for this. And, you know, because you've Zoomed enough over the last 3 or 4 years, you can click on a photo and you can see, okay, I got their names. I can put their names to their faces. And I think that that's just one of the great benefits of all of this. So let me say, here's what we're going to do over the next several weeks. It's 20 minutes to 8. And so it's my job as the teacher. We'll get through all the material. But tonight is all about introductions, and we're going to start with a little bit of history. So there were a bunch of you who said, I want to know history. We're going to do that. And the problem is, of course, I'm a historian. That's my passion is history. And which means that I have to be really careful to keep it within the next couple of weeks. But tonight, when we start talking about history, we're going to start at the beginning. Well, the beginning of Christianity, and move up through right before, we'll see how far we get, right before the Reformation, right before Christianity, really the Anglican communion, the Anglican Church started. And then we'll talk about next time, we'll talk about Anglicanism, the Church of England, and then really how it came to the United States and how we've worked with it. And then the third week, we'll talk about worship and spirituality, because what Episcopalians usually say is, if you want to know what we think, come worship with us, and you'll know what we think, what we believe, because it's all borne out in how we worship. And then we'll talk about, how do Episcopalians read the Bible? Because we read it in, I don't want to say a different way, but we don't read it in the way that the media says that the Bible should be read, perhaps. Maybe that's the best way to say it. We have a way of thinking that's Episcopalian or Anglican. And then how do we think? I just use that word. How do we think? And we'll talk about, and this is how Episcopalians do theology. I do this every week from the pulpit, but you may not get it because, and that's not a bad thing, because I just do it and I don't talk about how I do it. So you hear me or Nadine or any of the other folks, we talk about scripture and tradition and history and the world in ways that are informed by a particular way that Episcopalians or Anglicans think theologically. And then we'll end with a week talking about, how does the Episcopal Church govern itself? How do we operate? And then talk about mission. So that's sort of the how we'll work through these next several weeks. And if you have any questions, certainly raise your hand, interrupt me, unmute yourself. I don't have the auto mute or anything like that on there. But if you have any questions at any point, wave because that way I'll see, I'm looking at a gallery of you and I'll see the motion, but wave. Just, now I'm not going to go there yet. I'm going to go back here. So I sent out today an email that had both the link tonight, which obviously you figured out. There is also a link to a folder on a Google Drive. It doesn't make any difference. That has the syllabus, the schedule of readings, and what we'll be talking about over the next 6 weeks. And it will also, in that folder, are readings that will supplement, it will tell you what chapter in the book, and it will also have another reading or two that supplement that. My teaching style, just to be clear, is that I do not go back to the reading and say, well, as it said on page 572, I sort of assume that you have read the material, and then I'm going to kind of go off on my own world with that assumption. And I will refer to the readings, but I don't repeat what you've already read. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know, it's
You
kind
will
of
help
that,
us. You'll help us digest what we've read and put it in context.
yeah. And of course, like I say, I'll refer to it. I may differ from what you've read. And that's okay, because we can do that. But that's, so make sure that you know where those materials are. If you have any problem connecting with any of that stuff, let me know and I can email it to you directly. But this is a nice way to keep all of that material in one place. And obviously the syllabus is there with those links. So if you just, call up the syllabus, you can click on the links, and that brings you back here on a Monday night, or it takes you to the folder. If you have any questions on all of that, let me know. But I trust that folks take advantage of all of the different ways of learning that we have. And some people hear it, some people see it, some people read it. And so we're going to sort of do all of those various things over the course of the next several weeks. And obviously, if you have, as I've said before, if you have any questions, please let me know. But where I'm going to go next is one of the thorny questions we deal with all the time, and this has to do with language.
Every so often, I get the following question asked to me. What is the difference between an Anglican and an Episcopalian? And sometimes I roll pie back by asking the following question. What is the difference between a car and an automobile? The answer, of course, is there isn't, as those two words are synonyms and mean the same thing. So, what is the difference between an Anglican and an Episcopalian? Not too much, except an explanation of why they're calling themselves different words. Well, it all starts in the 17th century in Scotland. Yes, Scotland. The Anglicanism found in England had been introduced there when the kings of Scotland had also become the kings of England. However, in the 17th century, Anglicanism wasn't called Anglicanism yet, at least not in English. Eventually, these Scottish Anglicans needed a way to contrast themselves from their fellow Scottish Protestants, whose church was governed by elders and as such were called Presbyterians. As the Scottish Anglicans used bishops for church governance, they used the term Episcopalians. Fast forward to the end of the 18th century and the American War of Independence, and a similar situation arises. Those Americans who still had the core tenets and beliefs of the Church of England and wanted to contrast themselves with the other Protestants in their country had to find a name for themselves that didn't imply a connection to the nation they had just fought and won independence from. In short, they took a page from the Scots and named their church the Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States of America. Finally, at the beginning of the 19th century, someone thought it was a good idea to come up with an English word to describe the people that had a common doctrine that originated from the Church of England, or Ecclesiae Anglicana, as it was called in Latin. The word Anglican was derived from the Latin word Anglicania, and luckily it stuck. Thus, the vast majority of the world's Anglicans call themselves Anglicans, while a minority call themselves Episcopalians.
So, that's a question that I get asked all of the time. We'll talk about distinctions because they've gotten really fuzzy. We'll talk about those as we go on, but we are the Episcopal Church in the United States of America, or commonly just known as the Episcopal Church, because we are governed by bishops. We'll talk about that more. But we trace our lineage, our ancestry, to the Church of England, the Anglicans, those Angles, and we'll talk about that a little bit more over the course of the next 2 weeks. So I just wanted to roll that out right now, and then stop here just for a second and say, at this point, are there any questions before I really get into the thing that's going to warm some of your hearts, because you're all about history, and other people are going to say, history. It's time to go get a cup of coffee. So are there any questions that anybody has at this point about the structure of what we'll be doing over the next several weeks, what the end game is, any of that kind of stuff? Any questions, just let me know.
So you briefly touched on the foundation of Episcopalianism in the United States from Anglicans. Are we still in a relationship with the Anglican Church?
Good question. Hold that thought. We'll get to that. Promise. See that's the piece that will keep you coming back week after week, right? Other questions? Logistical, content oriented, any of that?
The church is open tomorrow because I wasn't at church yesterday, so I can pick up the book.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that question. Yeah. So some of you, I have gotten the books to. Some of you I have not. I've got, I think, 3 or 4 copies left. And so
what's the book?
If you, I will have them sitting out, and Kathy will know that if you come by to pick one up, you can. I ordered, I think, 10 copies, and we got way more folks than that on this call. So if I need to order more, I can. And because of the amazing utility of Amazon.com or Amazon Prime, I can get them pretty quickly. So I will go ahead and order a few more. But certainly they will be available next Sunday. Like I say, I think I've got 3 or 4 more sitting in the church right now, and I'll let Kathy know. So if you contact Kathy and say, I want to run by and pick one up, she will know where they are. Okay? That makes sense?
What is the book again?
It's called Welcome to the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's available on Kindle or not. I mean, I know some people are Kindle oriented. Other people want hard copies. I want a piece of paper in my hand. That's because I'm old school. Marcia.
Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, if you go, I will order some more for the church, but if you go to Amazon, you might be able to get it on Kindle. I can't do anything about Kindle. I can only do hard copy. Marcia, I saw you trying to wave your hand there.
I would like a copy, but I won't be dropping by the church, but I will be in church on Sunday. Can Kathy leave a copy somewhere with my name on it?
Yep. We'll make sure that, like I say, I will order more copies because I ordered 10, and I didn't expect this sort of response. So I will order more copies and get them as quickly as possible.
How much are they?
Say again?
How much are they?
Oh, they're not. This is the church's gift to you. So don't worry about that.
Just to let you know, Gary, that there is a Kindle version on Amazon, but it's $8.99.
Yeah, so if you wait for the hard copy from me, you get it for free, or you can put it on your Kindle and you can read it on the light rail. Okay, so anyway, I will do that. Don't worry about the costs. This is something that we absorb in the budget, and so don't worry about that. And again, if you go to the syllabus, you'll see that there's a reading assignment for next week. But we're doing 2 weeks worth of history, so don't worry about it. It's all good, and it will all with this stuff going for 2 weeks of history, it'll all be good. Okay. Other questions, logistical or otherwise, before we move into hardcore history? There we go. All right. So Anglicanism, people talk about the Church of England and they talk about Henry VIII, and they say it's all because he wanted a divorce. No. Let me just say no. Does Henry VIII's divorce fit into the picture? Yes. But is that the whole story? No. And so what I want to do in the next, well, we've got about 36 minutes, is get as far through as we can through sort of Anglican history or church history with an Anglican focus up to as far as we can get tonight. And so I'm only going to be talking about things that have to do with church history. There's so much, and I'll come back to that at the end. There's so much, but I want to talk about things that really specifically have to do with Anglican and or Episcopal church history. You'll hear names, you'll hear events, and those kinds of things that you may have learned or you will learn in kind of Western civilization classes or Western history classes, but a lot of Western history feeds into what became the Episcopal Church that we experience every Sunday. And the Episcopal Church, the Anglican Communion, we are an historic church. This is not something that just sort of grew out of somebody's head saying, I want to read the Bible and start a church. This has its grounding in history, and that's one of the reasons that I actually became an Episcopalian, was because of our grounding in history. And you're welcome to ask me that at some point, not tonight. But again, if you, let me just a caveat. If you have any questions, please wave your hand and let me know, and we'll stop. Now, I may say, let's talk about that privately, or I'll come back to that next week or sometime further down the line. But go ahead and ask the questions. I take notes. All right. So the church begins, of course, with Jesus, and as far as we know, he was crucified. His life happened before 35, those numbers, AD, or way scholars talk about it, CE, Common Era. So he died in 35. And I'm looking at the screen that you have. In 44, the Romans conquered Britain. Well, there were already some Christians as part of those Romans. Yeah, Bruce.
Did CE, the Common Era, start at the birth of Christ?
That's a question that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because that has to do with when was Jesus born. But that I've taught that class before. But, so we're going to use for purposes of argument, AD and CE are basically the same thing. So 44 AD and 44 CE means Jesus had been dead for 12 to 15 years. Okay, we'll just use that.
Thank you.
All right. So the Romans were already moving into Britain, and there were Christians in Rome pretty quickly because Paul, the Apostle Paul, was writing to the church in Rome in the 50s. So really quickly. So all of a sudden, Rome is conquering England. And the Roman legions are moving in and all of that kind of thing, right? So we know that Christians were there. And what we learned very quickly through all of the various historical records that we have was that sometime in the early part of the third century, so in the 200s, there was a Christian by the name of Alban, and that's his icon there, who was martyred. He was killed for offering shelter to a Christian missionary from Gaul or from France. So within 150 years of Jesus' death and resurrection, there was somebody who was already killed in Britain for saying that they were a Christian. So it didn't take long for Christianity to make it to Britain. And as I said earlier, we're really following Christianity in Britain. We'll talk about other things, but it really has to do with what's going on in Britain because it was the Christianity from Britain that came to the New World. So in the 3rd century, Alban was martyred. 100 years later, Christianity was made legal. Not only legal, but it became the religion of the empire under Constantine. So now it's okay to be a Christian. It's okay to express your faith. And that was true in Britain as well. Just a couple of years after that, there was a council, a gathering of bishops from around the Mediterranean world, known as the Council of Arles. It was held in Gaul or in France, and there were British bishops that were there. So the church had already gotten to the point in Britain that leadership had come up to the point that other people said, oh yeah, we're going to recognize the leadership from Britain. And that was the case at this Council of Arles. A few years later was this really major Council of Nicaea. You hear me say every Sunday, now let us recite the Nicene Creed. So that Nicene Creed, really dates from 325. And I say that because there were British bishops at the Council of Nicaea. All right. So the church in Britain had been established way, 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 way back to the point that they could send bishops to this council in Nicaea, which is in Asia Minor, for this council that was called by the emperor to talk about Christianity in the empire. So it wasn't some late kind of thing. It was from the very beginning. Christianity is a missionary religion, and it moved to Britain, and the British sort of were part of all of the growth of Christianity through all of this. That makes sense? Okay.
So
I'm a college teacher. I look for heads going up and down.
So basically, within
when I think
2
about
years,
zero, I see that. Pardon?
basically within 2 years from when Saint Alban was martyred and Christianity was legalized, they had bishops allocated
Well,
in Britain.
so Alban was martyred in the 3rd century. So the date for that
Okay, sorry.
is some say in the year 209. So we got 100 years
Okay.
of Alban being martyred. All right. So then we've got the Anglo-Saxons come in, so if you're a historian and you know your Western history, especially your English, you know that people are moving in and out of Britain. We'll hear about the Vikings. We got the Anglo-Saxons. I mean, there's all of this stuff going on in Europe, right? All of these kings and all of this. And the church is wrapped up in that. All right. Once the church becomes established as the religion, as an okay religion in Europe, it becomes a part of all of the movement of troops and countries and empires and all of that. That's just how it worked. So once the church got into Britain, one of the things that happened was it moved through the British Isles in different ways, whether it was up through Britain or into Ireland, and it took on its own character, given the religions that were already present in the British Isles. And so the way that we talk about that now is we say that Christianity became sort of adopted by the Celts, the native people of northwestern France and into the British Isles. And so when we talk about Ninian and all of these folks who went in to evangelize all of the people of the British Isles. So we've got the Picts and we've got the Celts and we got all these folks, and the missionaries came up, whether from Rome or from Gaul, to deal with these folks. And so Ninian, who was a Roman trained bishop and a friend of Martin of Tours, a Gaul, went in and evangelized the Picts, who were the painted people. So if you saw the movie Gladiator, right, and you saw the face paints, these are the people that Ninian went in to deal with and converted many of them. In this 5th century, and I'm going to bring up his name because it becomes important for Episcopalians, this guy named Pelagius, and he was a British or Christian thinker, and what his stuff was, he emphasized freedom and our capacity to cooperate with God. So it wasn't all about God's grace. It was God's grace included with what we would do. We'll talk about this later when we talk about theology. But Pelagius became declared a heretic because he thought we had actually something to do with our salvation. And this is, I don't want to say peculiar, but it becomes part of Anglican theology. And again, we'll talk about this later. Y'all know about Patrick, St. Patrick, going to Ireland, driving out the snakes. Well, they say there weren't any snakes there anyway, so it was an easy job.
Could we send him to Washington?
Yeah, we'll keep that out. So Patrick shows up and converts the Irish. So all of this is in the 5th century. So we're only talking about 400 years after Jesus. All of this has moved in and kind of begun to take over the British Isles, like the dog. All right. To the whites, I like the dog. So we've got all this stuff happening. Patrick moves into Ireland. He organizes, he evangelizes, he helps the poor, he confronts the pagan, the Druids, and he begins to get a little bit of power. ecclesiastical power. So the church and power began to move into the British Isles. In the middle of the 5th century, we have a debate over when was Easter. So we know from the New Testament that Easter happened around Passover. And given the New Testament, we could date Passover to a particular day, let's say in April. So is Easter related to Passover or is it April 8th? I'm just using an example. This became a debate. And Pope Leo the Great, he had to deal with this. And this debate over when is Easter consumed all sorts of folks in Western Europe and became an issue in Britain. And I'm going to skip over Tintagel and say that St. David went in. There was another missionary who went into Wales. And you'll see churches dedicated to St. David of Wales. And so that's why he was a missionary into Wales in this movement of Christianity up through the British Isles. St. Columba takes all of this into Scotland. So we've got all of this movement of Christianity up through Britain and then over into Ireland. So again, and you'll see issue of churches dedicated to St. Columba, maybe not in Colorado, but if you go around the US, you'll see St. Columba, you'll see St. David of Wales, certainly St. Patrick's. You'll see all of these churches that have to do with the movement of Christianity into the British Isles that we still pay attention to, and which is one of the reasons that I want to sort of highlight that here. Well, at the end of the 6th century, so 597, the Pope at the time, which was one of those Pope Gregories, sent a bishop named Augustine into Britain to sort of help bring Britain into line with the Roman Church. So we got the British Church doing its stuff, and we've got the Roman Church doing its stuff. The the English Channel did a good job of sort of chopping Europe away from what was going on in Britain. Well, Pope Gregory sent Augustine into Britain to help deal with this. He converted the king at that time, who was Ethelbert. And so Roman Christianity began to really set its tentacles, that's a nasty word, I don't mean that, to put its stamp on Christianity throughout all of Europe. So Augustine was sort of the forerunner of all of that, or the missionary of all of that. And he baptized Ethelbert. Ethelbert already had a Christian wife. So here we've got this stuff interplaying. And Gregory told Augustine to develop English liturgy, worship patterns that were appropriate for the English. So there was a sense that we're going to move in here easily, not conquering, but move in here easily and sort of take advantage of what they're already doing and adapt it to what the Roman Church was doing. Aidan, St. Aidan, the thing there that I referred to, took and began to establish monastic orders and went up to the northern part of Britain and set up this island of Lindisfarne with monastic stuff there. You'll hear St. Aidan's Church. There's a St. Aidan's Church in Boulder named after this person. So like I say, I bring these people in because you'll hear these, who was St. Aidan? Well, he took Christianity up into northern England, and we remember him, or northern Britain, and we remember him for that reason. In the middle of the 7th century, at the Abbey of Whitby, there was a synod, a gathering of bishops and clergy, to talk about what I'd already mentioned. I'm rushing through this, and I apologize. This difference between British Christianity or Celtic Christianity and Roman Christianity. Some of that was all about how do we practice, how do we deal with our monasteries, because the Celts and the British might have a monastery where one wing of the building was women and one wing of the building was men, and they had these sort of co-ed monasteries, which was never the case in Italy. You had monasteries for men in one city and convents for women in another. Never the twain should meet. That wasn't the case in Britain with the Celts. But the Celts, as I mentioned earlier, also dated Easter differently than the Romans did. And so the Synod of Whitby in the 7th century was the clergy and bishops were gathered to try and hammer this out. And the result is in the, as the picture there shows, the day of which annual religious festival was calculated. Easter was calculated according to the Roman rule, not the Celtic rule. And so we, as Episcopalians, as Anglicans, now follow what happened because of this Synod of Whitby in the 7th century. So for us, Easter is related to Passover, not a particular date on the calendar. So it moves because Passover, the Jewish festival of the Passover, moves because of moon and sun and things like that, as opposed to saying it's always on December 25th. December 25th doesn't move. It's always on December 25th. But Easter moves. And that decision was made for Anglicans at this council at the Synod of Whitby. Bruce, you're waving your hand.
Yeah, when Gregory sent Augustine in, was it because Gregory was thinking that Great Britain was a lost colony and wanted to reclaim it?
No, it had nothing to do with politics. Well, I can't say everything has to do with politics, but it had to do with bringing Christian practices together in the empire. And these debates, when is Easter? How are we going to deal with monastic stuff? I mean, there was a whole lot of stuff that was going on that had to do with how the church governed itself. So it didn't have to do with lost.
Did they almost like classify them as heretics?
No, not really. Not that I've heard of. So we move into, and I recognize it's 8:15. We move into the medieval period. You'll hear about the Venerable Bede. Bede wrote a history of the English Church, which is why he is important. You can get it. It's called the history. I think it is called the History of the English Church. It's fascinating because here in the 8th century, here's somebody who went back as a historian and wrote this wonderful history of what had gone on in England or in Britain. Bede, a lot of the stuff that Bede did we're heirs of. It's a book you can buy. I have a Penguin. You can get the Penguin version, the Penguin copy or the Penguin publication of the church, the history of the English Church by Bede. You'll see other names here. Again, I'm rushing through this and I apologize. You see Charlemagne. So you put Charlemagne, Charles the Great, Emperor of the Roman Empire, in the midst of all of this. He was there and, had to worry about this. He set a precedent as being a Christian king. So here we have that clear connection between religion and the state. And Charlemagne was one of the first of those who became sort of that Christian king. And all of a sudden, the Holy Roman Empire becomes a thing. with Charles the Great or Charlemagne. And that colors everything sort of that goes on. Alfred becomes the king in Britain that unifies the Angles and the Saxons under a Christian king. We hear about Dunstan, St. Dunstan again became Archbishop of Canterbury, and he crowns a king named Edgar, king of all of Britain. So here we have this thing about the church and the state that becomes so intertwined. They had been in Europe in other ways, but in terms of our Anglican history, here's the church and the state. And we'll talk about this more a little bit later, but we now have on the throne in Britain, Charles III, who is the King of England and all of the other stuff, but he is also the heir to all of these previous kings who were their sort of authorized I lost the word, he approved by the church. And if you looked at his coronation, the church is there. I mean, it was in the cathedral. This isn't something that happened, downtown at Trafalgar Square. This was in a cathedral. So all of this stuff became really apparent with Charles' coronation just a few months ago. So we've got Alfred the Great, Dunstan approving Edward. I list at the bottom of this slide a guy named Alphege, and this is purely personal. Alphege became the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he was martyred. He was killed by Vikings, all right, in the 11th century. Why is this personal? I have a lot of Swedish heritage, and I was ordained a priest on the feast of Saint Alphege. So, I got this stuff that this is kind of my history. So anyway, but we talk about the interplay of the Norse, the Angles, the Saxons, who's in Britain. All of this stuff contributes to who we are and our history as Episcopalians. We know about the Battle of Hastings, 1066, with all that went on there, the Norman conquest. William the Conqueror becomes king. Lots of important churches get burned because of Rome and all these other kinds of stuff. Margaret, Queen of Scots. We got all this stuff, the movement of Christianity into Scotland, all of these kinds of things. Anselm becomes Bishop of Canterbury. Problems there. He does some really wonderful theological stuff. Again, I apologize for rushing through here, just cognizant of time. Thomas à Becket, who will rid me of this tiresome priest? The king says, here we begin to get the arguments between church and state so entwined early on, but what happens if somebody is devoted to the church and that comes into conflict with the state when you're at high positions? And so we see that then for Americans into the 13th century. So there is this thing called the interdict. I think many of you have heard of the idea of excommunication.
Yes.
Okay, so excommunication means that you can't receive the sacraments. All right, so if you're in a world where you want to die in a state of grace so that you go to heaven, but you can't receive the sacraments, you can't have communion, you can't have last rites, that's a problem. So excommunication means that you're outside of, and for Roman, those of you who've come out of the Roman Catholic tradition, excommunication means you can't receive the sacraments. Divorced people can't receive the sacraments. Other people can't receive the sacraments. Well, how do you die? So excommunication is a big deal. Interdict is the national version of excommunication. So a country that might have been ruled by Catholic rulers or under the sway of the Pope could be put under interdict, and the Pope could tell the clergy in that area that they couldn't perform or give the sacraments. That means that nobody in the country would die under a state of grace. This is kind of problematic. So Britain was put under interdict in the 13th century, early part of the 13th century, for a variety of reasons. But the thing that came out of that, having less to do with Rome, was the Magna Carta. So even the foundations of American constitutional law that goes back to the 13th century had this sort of intriguing religious set of roots because of interdict, right? So those of you who know more about the history of all of this than I do can go back and look at it and come back next week and you can say, wait a minute, and I'll say, you're absolutely right. So it's 8:23. We're going to stop here pretty quickly. I'm just going to say that as you think through, those of you who've done your Western Civ or other kinds of historical courses, think of Francis of Assisi as in the 13th century. Salisbury Cathedral in the early part of the 13th century was completed, and a lot of the worship that we do on a Sunday morning comes from the worship that was done at Salisbury Cathedral in the 13th century. Wow. That tradition grounds what a lot of we do. And so if you go, I'm just going to use a real quick example. During Advent, those 4 weeks prior to Christmas, many churches will use purple candles for those 4 Sundays. Other churches will use blue candles. Blue is what Salisbury used. Purple is what Rome used. And so you can sort of see some of this stuff borne out in really interesting ways. In the 13th centuries, the Franciscans arrive, this missionary order. The Dominicans arrive. We're now into the period of well, shoot, just lost the word. Lost the word. The way medieval thinkers began to do theology, in there. William of Ockham, another theologian. There are a lot of theologians that arose in Britain whose influence spread throughout Europe. And so you'll hear about Roger Bacon or you'll hear about William of Ockham. And I'm going to stop there tonight, partly because I'm getting hoarse. But you know, there are other folks. We'll talk about these, and I'm just showing this slide. Folks like Julian of Norwich, we hear about Julian of Norwich in the Episcopal Church. John Wycliffe, you could also almost argue as an early reformer. Chaucer, Canterbury Tales. This is British. This is British Christianity and pilgrimages, and you know, this is Britain. This is British Christianity coming out. Marjorie Kempe, kind of this crazy, and I say that kind of lightly, but this crazy monastic woman who had all sorts of influence with kings in Europe. These folks came out of the British Church. So it's part of our heritage, and there's so much there, and then we get into the War of Roses, and the Tudors arise, and then we get Henry VIII, and we'll pick up there next week. Again, trying to rush through this, and I apologize for the hurry, but part of it is because we've got such a rich group of people who shared their own experiences here on this call. And I knew that this was going to be the case, but that's what we'll do next week is we'll pick up a little bit, and I'll try and move us a little more gradually into the Reformation, and then certainly into the Americas. But it's a complex history, and our history as Episcopalians or Anglicans is not recent. And that was one of the reasons that I became an Episcopalian, is because I wanted all of the history, not just something that arose kind of a little bit later. And so anyway, I do want to leave a few moments for questions about process, about what we've done in the past. You just got 1,500 years of history in 30 minutes. Yeah. I saw that, Molly. And I want to refer you to this slide. These online resources. If you go to this justice.anglican.org, you'll see the timeline, a lot of the timeline that I have used. And that early video that I showed comes from this Maple Anglican YouTube channel. And there's a lot of stuff on both of these, and you'll get a lot more information. It's what I'm doing here is compressing a lot, and I understand that. When you read the book, you'll get a little bit more. When you read the articles, you'll get a little bit more. And so I'm giving sort of my color on all of this. You'll see it from different places. But anyway, these references, if you download the syllabus, both of these, Anglican Online, Justice, those links are on the syllabus. And if you leave it up on your screen, you can click on it. If you print it, you'll have to go in and type it out. But anyway, questions, comments, things that I need to know about you that you haven't already said. What have I missed? Let me know what's going on. I stunned you into silence. There's just so much. I know that. And next week, I have to, when I first started doing this, I had 2 DVDs. And of course, we were doing this in person. I had 2 DVDs. One of the DVDs I loaned out, and I never got it back. That would have covered that would have covered everything that I've just been talking about. The second DVD I'll show next week, so you won't get me nattering on quite so much. I say that with a caveat, is I can't find it, and I wonder whether or not some of you may remember that my office was flooded several months ago, and I don't know whether or not it got lost. I've ordered a new one. I'm hoping it's going to get back. But that's what we'll do next week, is we'll really talk mostly about the Episcopal, the Anglican Church as it became who we are in the U.S. But a lot of the rest of this is important for what we'll talk about next week. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I get hoarse talking about all this, so I'm happy for the video. Any other questions? I'm looking up at the Whites. I'm looking at the Corrals, looking at the Hearsts. I'm looking at the Bateses, looking at Amy. Any other, and Cynthia, see your name there. Any other questions tonight?
Just one question on my part, Gary. Up until now, it would appear that we've looked at the Anglicans as still part of the Roman Catholic Church at that point. Is that correct?
Yes. we've been talking about Christianity in Britain. And until the early part of the 16th century, it was all the Western Church. It was all Roman Catholicism. Once we get into the 16th century and we start talking about Henry VIII, then things change. Or when we talk about Martin Luther and the Reformation, things change. So you're absolutely right. Yep, absolutely right. One last thing for the Roman Catholics among you, or former Roman Catholics or brought up Roman Catholic. I had a conversation earlier today, and I use this a lot in conversations that I have with Roman Catholics. Many years ago, I was helping prepare a couple for marriage. I wasn't going to do the ceremony, another priest was going to do it. And I was talking to the woman who was Episcopalian and the man who was Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how do you go to church together? Good question for people who are getting married, right? And the groom, who was the Roman Catholic, said, well, we go back and forth. And then he said, and when I go to her church, it's like going to grandma's house. It's just that she rearranged the furniture. So for those of you who've spent a chunk of time as Roman Catholics and then go to the Episcopal Church, there is this sense that all of the pieces that are there, they're just not in the same place. And so to your point, Bruce, yes, we're talking about this Roman Catholic heritage and then what happened because of the Reformation. And that has to do with how we think and how we practice and how we believe. And that's what we'll be talking about for the next 5 weeks. Okay? If you have any questions, let me know. Grab me on a Sunday, send me an email, give me a call. All of that stuff I think is on the syllabus. If you're unable to download anything, let me know and I can email it to you directly. But I'm glad to see a full Hollywood Squares here, and this is great. Anyway,
we've been able to see the other faces. We've just been seeing the online, your things you post. We haven't seen anybody's faces.
Yep. Well, start looking in church on Sunday.
Okay. No, I mean I can't see the faces on the screen.
Oh, well, you should be able to see some, but maybe not everybody.
I just seem like your resources online, that's taking up the full, we're on an iPad.
Okay. All right.
Oh, well, there we go. That has.
Is that the reason?
Yeah, probably.
It could be. In the upper right-hand side, Kathy, if you move or a pointer up there, you should get an option for view in the upper right-hand side. And if you don't, then it's because,
Okay, where's
Side by side speaker?
Side by side
gallery.
Gallery. Okay.
Gallery. Gotta see something gallery.
Oh, there we are. That worked.
Did it work? We still don't have the screen.
More?
Should we hit where it says participants now? Would that be it?
No,
if you minimize the shared screen, then there's more room for seeing.
It all depends on how you're working. Kathy, we'll talk about this offline. We'll let everybody else know. Anyway,
picture what pops on my screen, and then I'll see if that what I do.
Anyway, good night, y'all. Thank you so much. Again, if you've got any questions, let me know. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Shared.
Did you hit that more?
How do we do that?
It says leave.
Oh, yeah.
I see one picture. Okay. Well, we'll see. I'm gonna try to see everybody's faces. I hit the word more.